Zoom Sunday service. My name is Rachel. I'm your worship associate. This is a Zoom service and we'll only be meeting by Zoom for the rest of August. Today's sermon is Then and Now, and our fabulous returning guest minister is Reverend Stefanie Etzbach-Dale. Our gathering music video was Return Again by Shlomo Carlebach, vocals Elena Hemingway. Carlebach is considered by many to be the foremost Jewish religious songwriter of the 20th century. He composed thousands of songs and became known as the singing rabbi. This song is also in our hymnal, number 1011, the Teal hymnal. And what a beautiful way to start the service, return again, return to our essence. A really wonderful reminder not to get too distracted and divided by all the foolishness that goes on often around us. In July, most of the worship committee and our music director ran to different parts of the country or the world. Our part-time minister resigned, and while we went missing, Don created a fantastic series of Sunday services around a book by a UU minister. Don was also the worship associate for these series, and Don was also the Zoom technician for each of those Sundays. And if you ever have the opportunity to attend a film series or book discussion or any program that Don puts together and moderates, you will want to attend it. Don't miss this opportunity. It seems that Don's questions and understandings, we take those and we learn not just about the book or movie, but Don gets us to explore what those concepts mean in our lives and how to utilize the concepts to work toward making our world a better place. The last series was great, and I look forward to Don's next one. So stay tuned, everyone. Our main doctrine in Unitarian Universalism is love. We care about you and accept you for who and what you are. We recognize that each of us is on our own unique spiritual journey, and yet we come together. No matter who you love, your age, color of your skin, your immigration or economic status, you are loved and welcome. We have 7 principles that we affirm and promote, and which we hold as strong values and moral guides. I think today's sermon focuses primarily on our 1st and 6th principles, the inherent worth and dignity of each person, and the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. Each Sunday service is a community effort. We have a technician for sound and PowerPoint and other AV magic. We have posting of the lyrics in chat, scheduling of speakers, juggling their availability, posting on Facebook and other social media. We have the building maintenance and delightful flowers in front. And even though we're not in our building, this is all something that keeps us moving forward and together. And we thank everyone. And a special thanks to the board, worship committee, and our ministerial search committee. And then a big thanks to all of you for joining us today. Our community is a vibrant one, although small, and we're here to support each other, and we're here for you. We have a slide that shows our upcoming services. And next week, we have Yvette McDonald, a Star King student, and she was lovely. I mean, alive, funny, engaging, and that'll be next week. And then on the 28th, we have our Social Justice Sunday, Homelessness in Orange County. Our divinely magnificent minister today is Reverend Stefanie, a Unitarian Universalist minister with 20 years of service to a number of congregations in the Pacific Midwestern region. Reverend Stefanie provides pastoral care, works as a spiritual director, focusing on building spiritual courage, resilience, and joy through private spiritual direction sessions, group retreats and workshops, public speaking, and art. And if you want more information, please go to Reverend Stefanie's website, tendingspirit.com. The link is in the e-blast for today's service. And as mentioned before, the title of today's sermon is Then and Now. And Reverend Stefanie describes her sermon like this. Given the challenges we face today, it may be hard to find value in ancient wisdom stories. Today, we examine and link two such stories, applying them to the problem of growing polarization in this country. Polarization is very personal to me. I feel my disassociation and dismissal of people because of their beliefs, and that's not who I want to be. But it's my knee-jerk reaction. As many of you know, my daughter and her conspiracy-believing, extremely right-wing and ultra-conservative Catholic husband are moving into our home complex in the next few months. They've been married 5 years now, married in the Catholic Church, and my daughter converted to Catholicism. She's still my daughter, so they had their wedding reception in our beautiful UUFLB building. And I had difficulty relating to my son-in-law for about 4 of the last 5 years that they've been married. And that's not who I want to be. This last year, we're hugging, saying, I love you. And at least from my part, I mean it. But we avoid any political topics. And I'd like to think that I'm maturing and growing. And maybe I'm no longer worried about losing my daughter to the other side. But in preparing for today's service, the thought occurred to me, could it be that I'm just as polarized as ever, but I'm only more accepting and able to love and enjoy him because of the past presidential election and the change in government that occurred? I'm worried that I may revert to my habit of being annoyed with him and everyone on the other side if the results of the 2024 election are not what I hope for. Anyway, I'm very grateful for today's sermon and having Reverend Stefanie here, because I could use some ancient wisdom when dealing with polar opposites, especially ones in my immediate family, and then also in our greater family of humanity. Reverend Stefanie will hopefully be able to stick around for a short time after the service to answer any questions that we may have. I forgot to check with Reverend Stefanie ahead of time to make sure that she could stick around, but I'm hoping that she'll be able to. Our centering thought today is something that spoke to me as a way to diminish polarization. And of course, as Reverend Stefanie said earlier, yeah, it sort of fits with almost any topic. So please unmute yourselves and we'll read it together. Okay. Please read with me. The most important aspect of love is not in giving or the receiving. It's in the being. When I need love from others, or need to give love to others, I'm caught in an unstable situation. Being in love rather than giving or taking love is the only thing that provides stability. Being in love means seeing the beloved all around me. Ram Dass or Alan Watts. Now we go to our call to worship.
Our opening words this morning are by Lynn Unger, and they're entitled Serenade. She wrote, "It's deep night, and the moon is so bright, but some fool of a bird is singing like it's Mardi Gras, like it's his solo at the Sunday choir, like he's determined to enact some operatic scene of love and death before the curtain closes. He has no sense of proportion. He has no sense of propriety or of timing. I don't know whether to flap a towel in his direction or to applaud. All I know is I am not sleeping. And apparently, he's just getting started. This is where we live. It's just past midnight, but one of us is convinced that we are practically to dawn." Thus ends our opening words. If you have a chalice at home, feel free to use this opportunity to light it as I share these words. We ignite this flame, symbol of our unity, aware that it is composed of source fuel, of wick and of many colors, aware that its light draws attention to the dark, its heat draws attention to the cool, and its flickering to stillness. We ignite this flame, symbol of our unity, celebrating all the individual elements that give it shape and meaning within and among us. And now for our unison affirmation.
That was beautiful. Please unmute again. And on your screen will be a short affirmation that we'll read together to remind ourselves why we come together. We'll again unmute and we'll read this together. Love
is
the
the
spirit
spirit,
of this fellowship, and service is
its
law.
great covenant.
This is our great covenant to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth of love, and to help one another. Now we turn to our wonderful music director, Carole, for our opening hymn, Come Sing a Song. The words will be in chat, thanks to Dara. And please feel, hopefully you'll join in the singing even though you're muted.
Good morning. It's good to be back with you all, and I hope you'll feel like singing loud and clearly. So come join me in singing, come sing a song. Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me, that I might know you're mine. And I'll bring you home when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the wintertime. Come dream my dream with me. Come dream my dream with me. Come dream my dream with me, that I might know you're mine. And I'll bring you home when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the wintertime. Come walk in rain with me. Come walk in rain with me. Come walk in rain with me, that I might know you're mine. And I'll bring you home when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the wintertime. Come share a rose with me. Come share a rose with me. Come share a rose with me, that I might know you're mine. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll sing a song of love and a rose in the wintertime.
There we go. Wow, Carole, thank you. It's so good to have you back. Now we're going to pause our recording There are many ways to take action to help the fellowship, and one of the ways is by your financial support. I'll have a slide up that shows ways to donate, and this is also in the e-blast that went out for today's service. And if you're donating to the Windowsill Repair Fund, make a note of that on your payment method or let Tom know. And as you know, that is going into our Spirit Grant Fund. And so we have this fund to make the building improvements. And the Windowsill Fund especially is important. So please designate on your donations. And now while you stay muted, please join and sing at home on mute. From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, and from this we live.
From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, and from this we live. From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, and from this we live.
For our time of meditation, I invite you to take a couple of relaxed breaths, considering the range of emotions that you experienced this week, the encounters with people or places or concepts, those that raised joy and satisfaction, gratitude, those that led you to fear, regret, rage, or sorrow. Visualize the week, if you will, as a movie screen, across which these clouds of emotion swept, one after the other. Solitary, wispy clouds, barely perceptible, dark, clustering, rolling clouds, one after the other across the sky. Just keep noticing and breathing, bringing focus now back to your breath, in and out, as you shift your attention to the backdrop of the sky, expansive and serene, the backdrop to all of those emotions. May these words by an unknown author find their way into the deepest corners of your heart and mind. You are not wrong to be furious. You are not wrong to be scared. You are not wrong to wonder what to do today and tomorrow, and you're not wrong to notice and to relish the brilliance of the sky. You are not wrong to think of your children. You're not wrong to imagine people that you will never know. You are not wrong to think this doesn't really affect me, and to know that it really does. You are not wrong to look endlessly for pictures of puppies or kittens or flowers or trees. You're not wrong to try to massage the ache out of your own heart. You are not wrong to yell or to cry or to scream or to hide under the covers in your bed. You are not wrong to turn to your neighbor and say, well, what do we do now? You're not wrong. Our meditation words reminded that our emotions, our responses to the confounding details of our days, of the times in which we live, are not in and of themselves wrong. They, like the clouds that pass overhead, are made of the heat of distant times and places. Our emotions are hastened by the evaporation of all manner of hopes and illusions. There are so many kinds of clouds. There are so many emotions, each with their own origin stories and effects. A few weeks ago, just as the Supreme Court decision on Roe v. Wade became public, I was fortunate enough to be traveling off the grid, no TV. I had booked a charming bed and breakfast in Western Massachusetts, furnished with antiques, surrounded by lush green gardens, and was looking forward to reconnecting with the area, settling my soul a bit after a trying several years. My host was so kind. He carried my bags all the way to my room without being asked, and he offered me an evening snack, which I was delighted to accept. As I enjoyed the repast, he told me about how he and his wife had struggled to build this little slice of heaven, as he called it. He told me about his family, and he asked me about mine. And after making some welcome recommendations to enhance my stay that week, he transgressed rather boldly into conversational territory I had not anticipated. Territory I did not welcome. Territory that made me feel unwelcome and unsafe. Territory that, quite frankly, set me into a panic. I honestly don't know how we got there, or what would make him think it would be appropriate to make such huge assumptions about the faith life and politics of me, his guest. Why he had no qualms about sharing his perceptions and judgments of those who, well, those who share my liberal religious values. I was horrified, clearly in the wrong place, and it was too late to go find another place. So I determined to just try to stay cool and to not have it out with him, because I was on vacation and I was tired. And aside from that, nothing I said was likely to make a difference anyway, I told myself. And I was on his turf and was clearly not going to be able to get him to see things from my perspective. So I dug my fingernails into my palm and I pivoted to questions about that lovely painting in the corner. And I took the earliest possible opportunity to excuse myself and go to bed, but not before calling my beloved George and venting my feelings and saying to him all the things I had wanted to say to my impassioned, underinformed, and extremely impolite host. Can anyone relate to this sort of encounter, where you're unexpectedly confronted with human beings whose viewpoints feel hostile, putting you on defensive? It was not my highest moment. And from what I'm hearing, it's not an uncommon scenario these days, unfortunately. So many people are discovering with horror how quickly neighborly conversations and even family gatherings can become volatile, offensive, bringing out the worst in us, or at least making us wish there were a roadmap to help us navigate. The whole encounter, my stay there, left me feeling polluted somehow. Not just by his words, but by my own sense of inadequacy in response to them. Especially at 2:00 in the morning, as I considered even more things I could have, should have said or done in the moment. Human beings and human dynamics are so incredibly complex. Each and every one of us traveling with unseen wounds and expectations, armed with narratives, the origins and effects of which we may not even be aware of. And then we find ourselves across the table from one another, apparently speaking the same language, but with those words conjuring up entirely different worlds, entirely different collective histories, and entirely different social dangers and imperatives. When I returned home, I realized that encounter was not just an aberration. It reflected a micro version of what is happening in so many communities in this country and what's happening on a macro level. We have become such strangers to one another and even to ourselves. As I am wont to do, when I got home, I turned to our wide range of wisdom sources and stories, and I found myself drawn to what the Bible has to say about power dynamics and personal agency and communication and right relationship. Particularly, I was drawn to the earlier writings, those informing the Jewish tradition, because clearly Jewish history is, from the very beginning, ripe with interpersonal complexity. As Adam and Eve negotiate the power they have to make choices and to suffer consequences. One of the stories that always intrigued me was the one of Noah, considered the most righteous of his generation. So in this story, Noah was given insider information that the world would be destroyed. I have to assume that he felt so overwhelmed, so ill-equipped to argue on behalf of less drastic measures in response to God's judgment of human depravity, that he just did what he was told. He built a boat. Okay, I'll build a boat, giving access only to his immediate family and to mating pairs of each creature on earth, and then just waited out the deluge. And then the first thing he did when back on dry land was plant a vineyard, make wine, and drink away his grief and regret. That story leads me to the one of Jonah and the whale. Jonah was also given insider information of pending destruction, but he was charged, he was empowered to do something to prevent it. His response was to run in the other direction, the opposite direction, which led to being swallowed by that whale and spit out in exactly the place he was actively avoiding. Jonah reluctantly informs the inhabitants of Nineveh of God's plans, not in fact believing that they deserve an opportunity to repent and do right and be saved. So harsh was his judgment of them. In the end, the citizens of Nineveh do repent and they are saved by God, but Jonah's story ends in bitterness. These two stories highlight two very different ways of confronting power. Two very different ways of responding to the actual or potential sufferings of others. Two different ways of living into one's own agency and of processing trauma, both of which can be informative, I think, as we navigate our own unfolding stories. Noah is figuratively and quite literally stuck in a windowless floating box. He is disconnected from the impact of his unwillingness to speak up. And the first chance he gets, he numbs his emotions with wine. How many of us are moved to do something similar when confronted with things that feel beyond our control? Just block them out. Jonah does feel empowered to argue with God, but his take on things is that the citizens of Nineveh deserve to be annihilated. His rigid judgment of them blinds him to the fact that God seems to think they deserve a second chance. His frigidity, his sense of justice, blinds him to the fact that they were being offered a second chance and that they were actually capable of change. As far as I'm concerned, neither of these two biblical heroes are exemplars of right relationship. And that makes me feel a little better about my own recent inadequacy in that regard. The third story I was drawn to was that of the city of Babel. Now, I was taught that story was about the dangers of hubris, the dangers of trying to overreach our human limitations, of building a tower high enough to reach to the heavens. In rereading it, I found something else in that story, namely the dangers of insisting upon like-mindedness, the dangers of clustering together in colonies of sameness, of protecting and expecting sameness. God's response in this story was to confuse that sameness by causing different languages to arise among the people, forcing them, I have to imagine, to work a lot harder at their relationships, forcing them to take nothing for granted, to move past assumptions about one another, to listen more deeply, to be more curious, to get creative in conveying what is essential. So this story brings to mind that evening with my bed and breakfast host, so impassioned about what he perceived to be very real threats to his livelihood, his personhood, his country, his world. The impropriety of his unsolicited sharing aside, the force and sincerity of his emotions were palpable to me. Like the huge, pendulous purple rain clouds that darkened the horizon that evening. And his sincerity moved me. One of us was convinced that the apocalypse was well underway. And I'll give you a hint, it wasn't me. Given that firmly held belief and the grief and fears it clearly engendered for him, I have to concede he was not wrong to be grieving. He was not wrong to be angry. His emotions were not wrong. Personally, I do have concerns, however, about how he got there and about the solutions that he was proposing, many of which felt like a threat to my personhood and to the personhood of people I care about, to the country I live in and the world upon which I am and upon which we all are dependent. To say nothing of the concerns I have about his judgment regarding what constitutes hospitality. In retrospect, I find myself wondering if it is possible to agree upon and to do what is essential, which I think is to help one another in the spirit of our meditation words, help one another massage the ache out of our hearts. These stories point to the idea that this is something we have always struggled with. We've always had a hard time with this. So can we find a way to turn to one another? Can we find a way to believe in second chances and in our own voices and choices, especially when the choices of other people may feel so threatening to us? Can we learn to listen past the words spoken and turn to one another and say, okay, so given all of that, what do we do now? It was all I could do to not let my emotions get the better of me that night, at least not in a way that would contribute to the impropriety. But given a bit of time and distance and the increase of polarization I see all around me, I can't help but wonder if I couldn't have tried harder to find a way to not check out of the conversation. If I couldn't have brought more curiosity to him once I realized we really were speaking different languages. What difference might it have made if I had told him that I hear his pain and his fear? If I had found a way to acknowledge it as a reaction to the belief, rightly or wrongly, that who and what he loves is being threatened. It may have made no difference whatsoever. It's impossible to know. But it does feel right to not be dismissive of the encounter or of his sincerity, or of how dangerous it really can be in these violently volatile days to actively engage with and confront those who feel that their backs are to the wall and that you are the enemy. It is important to pick and choose our battles, to gauge our priorities from one moment to the next. Even standing on a stage to which one was invited can endanger one's life. All I knew the next day was that I was determined to leave a review that was honest and reflected my integrity, because integrity is important to me, so that's what I did. The fact is, his little slice of heaven in the Berkshires that he and his wife worked so hard to build was, as I wrote, beautifully and lovingly appointed. The rooms and gardens and snacks were flawless, as only rooms and gardens and snacks can be. Human beings, on the other hand, not so much. We, all of us, are at times not nearly as neat and tidy and hospitable as we'd like to be, or as maybe we should be. That is the most significant take-home message of this experience and of the stories I read. That human beings and human dynamics are complex, and they always have been. And that our emotions, whatever their origin, can be equated with clouds in the sky just passing by. They do deserve, if nothing else, to be noticed and to be acknowledged. But it is a mistake, I believe, to just leave it at that. It is a mistake to expect sameness, to take for granted what is essential to those we encounter and how they might feel moved to be responsive to their own emotions. So I'm sorry to say there are no easy answers to the age-old issue of polarization and of power dynamics and of agency and relationship. All I can leave you with is the encouragement to understand the sources and expressions of your own integrity, moment to moment, with as much compassion for self and other as you can muster, no matter where your journeys may take you. So may it be.
Thank you, Reverend Stefanie. Now is the time that we extinguish our chalice. Together, we shared this flame, this light of hope and love. This flame represents our intentional and our unconditional love that we will carry with us out into the world. And I know after today's sermon, mine will be with a little bit more compassion. Thank you. And now to Reverend Stefanie for our benediction.
Beyond of all of our differences, we are one. In the words of Albert Camus, in the midst of hate, I found that there was within me an invincible love. In the midst of tears, I found there was within me an invincible smile. In the midst of chaos, I found there was within me an invincible calm. I realized through it all that in the midst of winter, there was within me an invincible summer, and that makes me, if nothing else, happy. For it says that no matter how hard the world pushes against me or within me, there is something stronger, something better, pushing right back. As you enter this day and week, may the pushing be gentle, so we may each open like a rose to love invincible and tangible. So may it be.
And now to Carole, our wonderful Carole, for our closing hymn, I Know This Rose Will Open.
Let's sing this through twice together, please.
Thank you, Carole. Now we're going to join our hearts once again. Stay muted and we'll sing along as Carole takes us out with Let There Be Peace on Earth. And remember to stick around for Reverend Stefanie if you have any questions.
Earth is our moment in peace eternally. Let there be peace on earth. Let it begin. Oh, have a lovely day. Thank you, Reverend Stephanie.
Thank you, everyone.